Hey folks, I never imagined I'd be the kind of guy to pour my soul out on the internet, but here we are. There's a lesson in this mess I'm about to share, and who knows, maybe it'll save some of you from making the same mistakes I did. This isn't some story I've cooked up for kicks. It's my real life, raw and ugly. But if telling it keeps even one person from being as clueless as I was, then it's worth it. So let's start with a quick intro. Hi, I'm the guy whose life got flipped upside down by a stupid joke. Yeah, you heard that right. A damn joke led to me discovering my wife, the woman I thought I'd grow old with, was messing around behind my back. Before I dive into that nightmare, let me set the stage so you can see just how badly I got played. I'm in my early 40s now, and like most guys my age, I've got a few gray hairs creeping in, courtesy of life, I guess. I'm not a model by any means, but I keep in decent shape, try to take care of myself. I've got a solid job as a project manager for a mid-sized firm. We're not rolling in dough, but we've never had to sweat over bills either. I thought I was doing pretty well, taking care of my family, keeping everything stable. But man, I was completely blind to what was simmering under the surface. Now let's talk about her, Laura. We met about 13 years ago, and the first time I laid eyes on her, I was floored. She's blonde, tall, with these sharp, striking features that make people turn heads when she walks into a room. And yeah, I wasn't immune to that. I fell hard, thought I had hit the jackpot. Laura had this magnetic energy about her, always wanting more, always chasing something bigger. In the beginning, I liked that about her. She made me feel like we were building something together. But as time went on, it became pretty clear that her version of bigger and better didn't include us. It was all about her. More attention, more compliments, more stuff. Expensive stuff, too. Designer bags, the latest phones, flashy jewelry. I tried to keep up, buy her things when I could, but honestly, I could never satisfy her appetite. Laura didn't work for the first few years of our marriage. She stayed home with our son while I was out busting my ass to keep things going. But when our boys started school, she landed a job at a high-end gym as a personal trainer. At first, I didn't think much of it. I was just glad she had something to do besides spending money and griping about how I didn't have enough time for her. Now let me tell you about our son. He's 8 now, and man, I love that kid more than anything. He's got this bright red hair, which is where the joke that started this whole mess comes in. See, I'm a brunette, Laura's blonde, and yet our son, he's a redhead. I get how genetics work, but it turned into this running joke between us. I'd make stupid comments like, hey, maybe the mailman's got some explaining to do, and Laura would either laugh or roll her eyes. But one night, during dinner, I cracked the same old joke. Maybe I should have a chat with a neighbor about our redhead, I said, half laughing with my mouth full of food. It was supposed to be one of those throwaway lines that don't even land anymore because you've said them a million times. Only this time, Laura's reaction wasn't what I expected. She didn't laugh, didn't roll her eyes. Instead, she froze, just for a split second. But it was enough, a flicker of something. Her smile disappeared for a heartbeat before she forced it back. It was like someone had hit pause on her face, and man, that look got lodged in my brain. I don't know why, but I couldn't shake that moment. It was like I'd hit a nerve without even realizing it. Over the next few days, I started noticing other little things. Tiny things, really, the kind of stuff you wouldn't even register unless you were already suspicious. Like how her phone was suddenly attached to her at all times. Sure, we all keep our phones close, but Laura used to leave hers lying around without a care. Now it was always in her hand, in her pocket, or face down on the table. And when it buzzed, she'd grab it like her life depended on it. At first, I thought I was just being paranoid. Work was stressing me out, and I hadn't been around as much as I should have been. Late nights, early mornings, I was killing myself to keep everything running smoothly. Laura had always complained about how much I worked, but in my head, I was doing it for her and our son. I figured the distance between us was just the result of my job. But now, looking back, I should have seen the red flags way sooner. Then there were her so-called girls' nights. They weren't new. Laura's always had a group of friends she'd go out with now and then. But lately, these nights were happening more frequently. And she'd come home later and later, sometimes a little too tipsy for a casual night out. I'd ask how it went, and she'd just brush me off with a quick, same as always, maybe throw out a couple of names I didn't recognize. I didn't push. Why would I? She was an adult, and I trusted her. Or at least, I thought I did. But man, trust is a tricky thing. It's real easy to give, and real damn painful when it's shattered. See, here's the thing about trust. Once it gets even the tiniest crack, you start questioning everything. Your mind goes into overdrive, playing detective, trying to piece things together that might not even be there. I'd lay awake at night, thinking about that damn look on Laura's face when I made that stupid joke about our son's red hair. Was there more to it? Was she hiding something from me? Or was I just being a jealous, insecure idiot? Now, I'm sure you're wondering about my friends, Michael, David, and Scott. We've been tight for years since college. They've always had my back. Every couple of weeks, we'd escape the grind for a few days, fishing, hiking, renting a cabin out in the middle of nowhere. It was our way of unwinding, doing some good old guy stuff, and forgetting about the daily crap for a while. Laura hated those trips, though. Every time I'd pack my bag, she'd give me that look like I was abandoning her. Going off with your buddies again, she'd say, throwing in a guilt trip. What about me? What about your family? Maybe she had a point. Maybe wanting a break now, and then was selfish, but those trips kept me sane. They were my outlet to blow off steam, so I didn't lose it under the weight of work and home. It wasn't like I was gone every weekend, just every couple of weeks. I figured it was no big deal. Turns out, while I was out with the guys, Laura was busy doing, well, who knows what at the time. I didn't realize it back then, but she wasn't just sitting around waiting for me. That's for damn sure. I've always had a pretty twisted sense of humor. It's gotten me into trouble more times than I care to admit, but it's also gotten me out of some tight spots. Little did I know, though, it was about to blow my entire marriage to pieces. After that dinner table moment, where Laura froze after my dumb joke, I couldn't shake this nagging feeling. It was like a splinter in my brain. I didn't know if I was just being paranoid or if there was actually something wrong, but I started thinking about cheating and all the crap that had never even crossed my mind before. One night, I'm scrolling through YouTube, trying to unwind after a long day. That's when I stumbled across this video. Some guy pranking his wife, pretending he was cheating on her. The guy casually drops a fake confession and films her reaction. She freaks out screaming, throwing stuff. The whole thing was a joke to get a rise out of her. And by the end, they're both laughing. For some reason, I couldn't stop watching it. It was stupid, but it stuck with me. And that's where my own brand of dumb came in. I started thinking, what if I did the same thing with Laura? She's always been jealous, not of my friends, but of this imaginary lineup of women she thought I was running around with whenever I was out with the guys. Every time I come back from one of those trips with Michael, David, and Scott, she'd launch into her usual accusations. Where'd you really go? Who were you with? It was exhausting. I tried to calm her down, tell her it was just the guys, but she never seemed to buy it. Thing is, I'd never given her a reason to doubt me. I'm not the type to cheat, but she was dead set on believing that if I wasn't glued to her side, I was off with some random woman. So in my slightly buzzed and twisted brain, I figured, why not prank her like that guy in the video? Let her feel what it's like when the tables are turned. I had no idea what kind of Pandora's box I was opening. One night, after having a few drinks at the bar with Michael and David, I came home, still a little tipsy, but in control. Laura was in her usual sour mood, tossing out passive-aggressive comments about how I was probably out with other women again. Normally, I'd just brush it off or argue with her, but this time, with that stupid YouTube prank fresh in my head and the alcohol warming my blood, I decided to go for it. I was going to pull off the best fake confession she'd ever heard. I quietly set my phone on the counter, angling it just right to catch everything on video. Then I turned to her, pretending to look serious, like I had the weight of the world on my shoulders. I had to sell it, make it believable. Laura, I said, sighing dramatically, I need to tell you something. I've been cheating on you. I was feeling pretty damn proud of myself, honestly. I thought I nailed it, like some actor pulling off a performance worthy of an Oscar. I figured she'd freak out, maybe throw some dishes, scream at me, just like the wife in the video. But she didn't. Nope, she didn't react at all the way I expected. Instead, she just stood there, staring at me with this expression I couldn't read. It wasn't anger. It wasn't sadness. It was something else. And in that moment, I remember thinking, what the hell is going on? Then she hit me with it. Well, she said, crossing her arms like she was gearing up for a fight. I've been cheating on you too. At first I laughed. I mean, come on, we were in the middle of my prank, right? So, I figured she was trying to flip the joke back on me, outdoing my attempt. I even threw in some snide remark like, oh yeah? With who? David? Michael? The words came out like a joke, but her face stayed stone cold. No change at all. Yeah, she said, her voice flat. With both of them. That's when everything started spinning, and it wasn't just the alcohol hitting me. My laugh caught in my throat, like it had nowhere to go. Wait, what? I asked, feeling like I'd just wandered into a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. You're not serious, right? She didn't flinch, not even a blink. I'm dead serious. I've been screwing both of them. For a second, I thought maybe I was hearing things, that maybe the booze had messed with my head. But no, the cold, hard reality of it was sinking in fast. I just sat there, staring at her, my heart pounding so hard I thought it had burst out of my chest. My head was buzzing, like I was waiting for the punchline to a joke that never came. But this wasn't a joke. There wasn't going to be a punchline. After that, things got messy. Real messy. I don't remember everything. There was shouting, angry words, accusations, stuff I probably don't even want to recall. What I do remember, though, is stumbling out of the house at some point, collapsing onto the doorstep, my hands gripping my head, feeling like my entire world had just shattered into a million pieces. Because it had. That prank I thought would be funny, it backfired in the worst way imaginable. This wasn't just some joke anymore. This was my life, and everything I thought I knew about it was crumbling faster than I could keep up. Filing for divorce was the easy part, really. Cold, clinical, almost satisfying in a way, knowing I was finally cutting myself loose from Laura. But after I signed those papers, the questions started gnawing at me. It wasn't enough to just walk away. I needed more. Closure, maybe? Or some sick sense of justice. And I knew exactly where to start. Michael. Laura's betrayal hurt like hell, don't get me wrong. But Michael? That was a different kind of gut punch. We'd been friends for over a decade, ever since college. He wasn't just some guy I grabbed beers with. He was my best friend, the guy who'd been there for every important moment of my life. My wedding, the birth of my son. Now, finding out he'd been screwing my wife behind my back, that was a whole new level of pain. The more I thought about it, the more it consumed me. There was no way I could just let it slide. I wasn't the type of guy to sit back and take it. I wanted revenge, plain and simple. Scott was the first person I turned to when I started planning how to get back at Michael. Out of our group, Scott's always been the level-headed one, the guy who can think straight when the rest of us are just reacting. He wasn't tangled up in Laura's mess, so I knew I could count on him. After a long night of drinking and venting, I spilled everything to him. Laura, Michael, David, the prank gone horribly wrong, all of it. Scott was pissed on my behalf, and he didn't try to talk me out of it when I told him I needed to take Michael down. He just asked, "What do you want to do?" That's when the plans started coming together. Michael had a lot to lose, way more than just his friendship with me. He had a good job, a wife, and 2 kids. That's right, the guy who'd been screwing my wife was living the picture-perfect family life. All smiles on the surface, while he was sneaking around behind everyone's back. I wasn't just going to end our friendship. I was going to tear down the shiny image he'd built, expose him for the liar and cheat he was. I wanted him to feel the full weight of betrayal. First step, gather evidence. Laura had wiped most of her messages, but Scott had a buddy who was a whiz with tech. He managed to recover some of the deleted texts from Laura's phone. And let me tell you, what we found was more than enough. Explicit texts, photos, plans to meet up. Michael wasn't just some side fling for Laura. They'd been at it for months, maybe even longer. Seeing it all in black and white was like pouring salt on a fresh wound, but it also stoked the fire inside me. Now, it wasn't enough to just expose the affair. I wanted to hit Michael where it would hurt the most: his reputation, his family, his whole facade. That's where Scott came in again. He knew Michael's wife, let's call her Megan, from all the gatherings we'd had over the years. She was a good person, didn't deserve to be lied to like this. But we couldn't just go in guns blazing. This had to be handled smart, carefully, so it didn't blow up in our faces. Scott and I arranged a casual get-together, a weekend barbecue, nothing out of the ordinary. Michael and his family showed up, laughing, smiling like everything was perfect. Every time Megan looked at Michael with that loving expression, my blood boiled. But I kept my cool. I had bigger plans than just punching him in the face. After a few drinks, Scott and I slipped away with Megan for a private chat. She looked a little confused when we asked to talk to her alone, but she came with us. Once we were out of earshot of everyone else, I pulled out my phone. I showed her the texts, the photos, everything. At first, Megan didn't believe it. She stared at my phone like it was showing her something impossible. Her face went pale, and her eyes blinked rapidly as if trying to process what she was seeing. "This can't be real," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Michael would never." But it was real, and Scott, being the solid friend he is, was right there to back me up. He even offered to let her talk to his tech friend if she needed more proof of how we got those messages. We gave her space to let it all sink in, but the devastation was written all over her face. Megan was a good person, someone who didn't deserve this any more than I did. Still, she had to know the truth. She needed to see the man she was married to for who he really was. I half expected her to cry, to scream, maybe even lash out. But Megan was stronger than I gave her credit for. She just stood there, staring down at the ground for what felt like an eternity. Finally, she looked up and said, "What do we do now?" That's when I laid out the rest of the plan. Confronting Michael? That would have been way too easy. I didn't just want a confrontation. I wanted him to feel cornered, trapped, like there was no way out. Megan agreed to play along, and we set the trap for the following weekend. Another get-together, this time at Michael's place. When the day finally arrived, I could barely hold it together. Watching Michael laugh and joke around like everything was fine, like he hadn't stabbed me in the back, made my skin crawl. But I kept my cool. We let the day play out as usual, right up until the moment we'd planned. Megan took Michael aside, just like Scott and I had done with her, and confronted him. Their argument got loud enough that the whole neighborhood could probably hear it. Michael tried to lie his way out at first, but once Megan showed him the evidence, he had nowhere to run. That's when I made my move. I stepped into the room just as Megan delivered the final blow. "Ethan showed me everything," she said, her voice cold and sharp. Michael turned to face me, his skin pale, his mouth hanging open in shock. I could see the panic in his eyes, the realization that everything he'd built, his whole life, was crumbling right in front of him. That look, that moment of pure fear, that was what I had been waiting for. The betrayal in his eyes was a perfect reflection of the one I'd felt. And for the first time since all of this started, I felt a flicker of satisfaction. I didn't need to say much. The damage was done. I just stood there, letting him see the cold fury in my eyes, knowing that everything was falling apart because of what he'd done. But I wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. Taking down Michael had been easy in the end. His family, his reputation, those were the weak points I needed to hit. But David? David was a different kind of problem. The guy didn't have a family, didn't have much of a personal life at all, really. His entire world revolved around his career, his investments, and chasing the next big financial score. Money was his Achilles heel. If there was one thing David cared about more than himself, it was his bank account. And I knew that was where I could hurt him the most. After dealing with Michael, I didn't waste any time moving on to David. The anger that had been simmering inside me for months was now a full-blown inferno, and I wasn't holding back anymore. It was personal, sure, but it had to be smart. I couldn't just confront David the same way I did with Michael. That wouldn't work. David needed something different, something that would cut deep without leaving any trace that pointed back to me. That's when I came up with the idea: financial fraud. David was always boasting about his latest investments, always showing off how much money he was making, whether it was stocks, crypto, or some sketchy real estate deals. He loved acting like he was the smartest guy in the room, like no one could ever outplay him. But here's the thing about guys like David: they get cocky. They think they're untouchable. I was about to show him just how wrong he was. First, I needed Scott's help again. He'd already helped me take down Michael, but this time, I needed his tech skills. David was careful with his money, but Scott knew how to dig into the digital world. One night, over a few beers, I laid out the plan for Scott, and he was on board without hesitation. We started by digging through David's online profiles: LinkedIn, Facebook, the usual places. David loved to brag, so it wasn't hard to figure out where he was putting his money and what he was excited about. He'd been talking a lot about flipping properties for profit and a crypto exchange he was heavily invested in. It was a treasure trove of information. The next step was finding a way to exploit his overconfidence. David had been involved in some sketchy deals before, things that walked a fine line between legal and illegal, but nothing serious enough to bring him down. If we could create something that looked legitimate enough, we knew David would take the bait. Once he did, he'd destroy himself. With Scott's help, we set up a fake investment opportunity. We built a slick-looking website for a fictional startup, something that promised huge returns for early investors. It was exactly the kind of flashy, high-potential deal David would go for. We filled the site with fake testimonials, dummy profiles on financial forums, and enough buzzwords to make it look legit. Then I dangled the bait. During one of our usual after-work drinks, David started bragging about his latest crypto gains, so I casually mentioned the fake opportunity. I acted unsure, like I wasn't sold on it yet. Of course, that made David's eyes light up. He couldn't resist the idea of getting in early on something big, especially if I was hesitant. He thought he was smarter than me, thought he could see the opportunity one was too blind to catch. Little did he know, he was walking straight into the trap. Over the next few days, I kept playing it cool, acting like I was still on the fence about the investment. But David? He was all in. Every time we talked, he kept pushing me for more details, wanting to know everything. That's when I handed him the fake website and told him to check it out himself. It didn't take long. Within a week, David had thrown in a decent chunk of cash, enough to make him sweat if things went sideways, but not enough to break him. At least, not yet. The beauty of this plan was that once David was hooked, he did the rest of the work himself. He started pitching the investment to his own contacts, trying to build his stake, get more people involved. That's how these scams work. The more people you pull in, the bigger your share. David didn't even realize he was sinking deeper into the trap with every move. Scott and I waited for the right moment. After a few months, once David had invested even more money and was starting to see some returns, which of course we had fabricated, we pulled the plug. The site vanished. The company disappeared in a thin air, and so did David's investment. The fallout was immediate. David was furious, calling everyone he knew, scrambling to figure out what the hell had happened. He started pulling every string he could think of, contacting lawyers, trying to trace the money, but there was no trail. We'd scrubbed everything clean. The deeper he dug, the more it dawned on him that he'd been played, and there was nothing he could do about it. But the best part? He couldn't tell a soul. Admitting he'd been scammed would mean admitting he wasn't the financial genius he always pretended to be. Over the next few weeks, I watched him unravel. The once cocky, boastful David was gone. He stopped talking about his latest investments, stopped bragging about his big plans. He became quieter, withdrawn, like someone who'd taken a hard punch and was still trying to catch his breath. I didn't need to rub it in his face. The loss was punishment enough. David had built his entire identity around always coming out on top, and now he was just another sucker who got duped. And the best part? He never knew it was me behind it all. As for Scott, he wiped his hands clean once it was done. We didn't talk about it much afterward. We knew we'd done what needed to be done. I got my revenge on Michael and David, and there was a certain satisfaction in knowing that they both paid the price for what they did. But was it enough? At the time, yeah, it felt like it. But deep down, I knew there was still one person left. Laura. After everything with Michael and David, you'd think the divorce would have been the final nail in the coffin, right? The last chapter in this nightmare of betrayal and revenge. But nope, it dragged on longer than I ever imagined. Laura wasn't the kind of woman to just walk away quietly. She wasn't content with splitting up and moving on. No, she wanted to bleed me dry on her way out. At first, it seemed pretty straightforward. We agreed to sell the house, divide the assets, and go our separate ways. But when it came down to the money, Laura played hardball. She demanded an outrageous amount of alimony, more than I expected, especially since she had a job now. But the kicker? Her demand for child support. She didn't just want the standard amount. She wanted enough to live comfortably for years, as if she could fund her whole lifestyle off of that check without lifting a finger. For a while, I was ready to accept it. I mean, I love the kid. I'd raised him, been his father, and I figured, fine, I'll take the hit for him, even if it means working myself into the ground for the next decade. But something kept gnawing at me, especially after that joke I made about the neighbor's kid. Ever since Laura's face froze that night at the dinner table, the thought had been lodged in the back of my mind. And after everything that came out about her cheating, I couldn't ignore it anymore. So, I did something I never thought I'd do. I asked for a DNA test. It was a last resort, really. I didn't want to believe that the kid I'd raised for 8 years wasn't mine. Part of me felt guilty, like I was betraying him by even asking the question. But after all the lies Laura had told, I had to protect myself. I couldn't let her take everything from me, not if there was even a slim chance that she was lying about this too. The results came back a week later. I remember sitting in my lawyer's office, staring at the envelope like it was about to detonate. When I finally tore it open, it felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. The test came back negative. The boy I'd been calling my son for nearly a decade wasn't mine. I just sat there, clutching that piece of paper, unable to move. There was anger, of course, but more than that, I just felt empty, hollow, like everything I'd built with Laura had been a complete lie from the very start. She hadn't just lied about the usual things. She'd lied about who she was, who I was, and most painfully, who my own son was. This felt like the final, deepest betrayal, one that cut through everything else. Luckily, my lawyer had seen this kind of thing before. He didn't waste time. The DNA test wrecked Laura's whole case. With the proof that I wasn't the kid's biological father, her demands for child support were dead in the water. She tried to fight it, of course. She threw every excuse she could think of at the judge, claimed that I was still his father in every way that mattered, that I had raised him, and it didn't change anything. But legally it did. I wasn't responsible for a single cent. The divorce process dragged on for months after that, but Laura had lost all her leverage. We sold the house, and I took my half. I didn't care about fighting for more at that point. I just wanted to be done with it, done with her, and done with the mess my life had turned into. Once the house was gone, I packed up my things and moved to a new city, far from the chaos that had consumed me for so long. Starting over wasn't easy, but it was something I had to do. I needed to put distance, both physical and emotional, between me and everything that had happened. I needed a new start, a fresh life. I found a new job, nothing special, but enough to keep the bills paid and keep me occupied. Slowly, piece by piece, I began rebuilding. The memories of Laura, the kid, and all the betrayals, they still followed me, but I refused to let them define me anymore. I wasn't the same guy who'd cracked that stupid joke at the dinner table, blind to the disaster that was brewing right under my own roof. I'd changed. Maybe I was a little tougher, a little colder, but I was definitely smarter. I had been through hell, but I made it out the other side. And for the first time in years, I felt free. Underscore. Update. It's been a while since my last post, and I wanted to give an update because a lot has changed. If you followed my story up to now, you know how dark things got. How betrayal, divorce, and revenge dominated my life for a long time. But today, for the first time in what feels like forever, I can say that I've moved on. After the divorce and the sale of the house, I packed my things and left the city. Staying there just didn't make sense anymore. Too many painful memories, too much anger, and too many ghosts. I needed a fresh start, and moving to a new place gave me that. It wasn't easy, starting over never is, but it was necessary. I found a new job, nothing flashy, but it keeps the lights on and gives me a sense of purpose. I've made new friends, built new routines, and slowly but surely started putting my life back together. Of course, the past still lingers. There are nights when everything comes rushing back. How I could have missed the signs, how I let it all happen. But those moments don't define me anymore. They're just echoes of a life I've left behind. I've learned to focus on what's ahead, not what's behind, and I have to say it feels good. As for Laura, we don't really talk anymore. There's nothing left to say. And the kid? Well, that's complicated. I'm not his father, biologically or legally, but part of me will always care about him. He was as much a victim of all this as I was. But for my own sanity, I had to distance myself. Maybe one day, when he's older, we'll reconnect. But right now, I need to focus on my own life. I want to thank everyone who's followed along with my story, whether you've left comments, sent messages, or just quietly read my posts. Your support has meant more than you'll ever know. When you're going through the darkest moments, knowing that there are people out there who get it, people who are rooting for you, it makes all the difference. So, thank you. Truly. This journey has been long and brutal, but I'm on the other side now, and I couldn't have made it without the encouragement of strangers like you. So, what's next for me? Honestly, I don't know, but I'm taking things one day at a time. I'm learning to enjoy the little things again, things I'd forgotten I could even enjoy. I'm healthier, both mentally and physically, than I've been in years, and that's something I'm proud of. To anyone out there going through their own personal hell right now, just remember, you can get through it. It might feel impossible, but I'm living proof that life goes on. You'll heal, you'll grow, and you'll find your peace again. It takes time, but trust me, it's worth it. Thanks again to everyone who stuck by me through this roller coaster of a story. I wish you all the success, happiness, and strength in the world. Take care of yourselves, and never stop fighting for the life you deserve.